Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Your body naturally opens its eyes because it is fully rested. There's no blaring alarm clock piercing the silence. There is no morning commute waiting for you. There are no unread emails, no project deadlines, and no boss checking a clock to see if you arrived on time. You slowly sit up, stretch, look out at the world, and ask yourself a question that most modern humans only get to ask on a Saturday morning. What do I actually want to do today? For you, that is a luxury, a weekend fantasy. But for 99% of human history, that wasn't a vacation. That was every single morning of human existence. Today, the average person will spend roughly 90,000 hours of their life working. Think about that number. That is 1/3 of your entire waking existence completely dedicated to a job. We have been conditioned from birth to believe that this is the natural state of things. We are told that to survive, you must grind, you must produce, and you must climb a career ladder. And when we think about our ancient ancestors, we usually imagine a miserable, terrifying existence. We picture cavemen constantly on the brink of starvation, running for their lives from predators, freezing in the dark, and struggling every waking second just to make it to tomorrow. But modern anthropology and archaeology have discovered a secret that completely destroys that narrative. Before the invention of money, before the first seeds were planted, and before the concept of a job ever existed, ancient humans were living a life that most of us are working our entire lives just to retire into. So if they weren't working, what did they actually do all day?
To answer that question, we have to look back to 1963. An anthropologist named Richard Lee traveled to the Kalahari Desert to live with the Juo-Hansi people. They were one of the last remaining groups on Earth still living as nomadic hunter-gatherers, maintaining the exact lifestyle our ancestors lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Lee wanted to answer a basic question. How hard do you have to work to survive without modern technology? The modern Western world was locked into a 40 to 50-hour work week. Lee assumed in a harsh, unforgiving desert, these tribal people would be working around the clock just to find food and water. What he found shocked the scientific world. Lee tracked their daily activities meticulously and discovered that an adult hunter-gatherer spent an average of just 15 to 20 hours a week securing everything they needed to thrive. That is roughly 2 to 3 hours a day. The rest of their time, it belonged entirely to them. And this wasn't some weird fluke unique to the Kalahari. Over the next few decades, anthropologists studied other isolated tribes across the globe, the Hadza in Tanzania, the Ache in Paraguay, the Martu in Australia. Completely different environments, different continents, yet the exact same result. The original human work week was shorter than a modern part-time job.
Now, a lot of people might argue, sure, but those are modern tribes. How do we know humans lived that well 30,000 or 100,000 years ago? The undeniable proof isn't just found in observations, it is written directly into our bones. When evolutionary biologists examine the skeletal remains of early hunter-gatherers and compare them to the skeletons of the first humans who settled down to become farmers, the contrast is staggering. The hunter-gatherers were taller, robust, and physically powerful. Their teeth were nearly perfect, with virtually zero cavities, because their diet was incredibly diverse and lacked refined sugars. But the early farmers, the ones who invented structured daily labor, their skeletons tell a story of physical disaster. They were significantly shorter. Their bones show clear signs of severe iron deficiency and stunted growth. Their teeth were riddled with decay from grain-heavy diets, and their spines and joints show advanced arthritis from repetitive, back-breaking labor like plowing fields and grinding grain. The evolutionary record makes it clear. Ancient hunter-gatherers weren't struggling to survive. They were healthier, stronger, and worked significantly less than the generations that followed them. So let's actually reconstruct a typical day in your life 50,000 years ago. You wake up around dawn. The fire from the night before is still smoldering, and someone throws a few fresh logs onto the coals. There's no frantic rushing to get dressed or packed. Breakfast is inherently social. You'll eat whatever was brought back from the day before, maybe some leftover roasted meat, a handful of wild nuts, or fresh berries. You sit around the fire, laughing, talking, and loosely planning the day, not because a schedule demands it, but because humans are naturally collaborative. Around mid-morning, the productive part of the day begins. A small group might head out to forage for plants, while another group goes to track game. But here is the key difference. You don't do this every single day. If a hunt was highly successful 2 days ago and there is still food in the camp, nobody leaves. You just stay put. And when it did come time to hunt, it looked nothing like the chaotic, frantic action scenes you see in Hollywood movies. Humans are what biologists call persistent hunters. We aren't the fastest species, but we have a biological superpower: endurance. We can sweat to regulate our temperature while running, whereas most animals can only cool down by panting. A hunt was essentially a long, steady, conversational jog. A group of humans would track an animal like a kudu or a deer for 3, 4, or 5 hours in the midday heat, never letting it rest. Eventually, the animal's core temperature would skyrocket, and it would simply collapse from heat exhaustion. The hunters would dispatch it quickly, carry it back to camp, and the work for the next few days was done. Meanwhile, back at the base camp, others might spend the morning making or repairing tools. They would chip flint to make arrowheads, weave fibers into nets, or scrape animal hides to make soft clothing. But there were no managers monitoring their efficiency. There were no quotas to fill. People crafted things with care, because skill and competence earned you deep respect within the tribe. Making things well was simply part of being human. By early afternoon, the survival work was completely finished. The food was brought back, distributed, and shared equally among everyone in the tribe. What happens next is the part that modern hustle culture humans find almost impossible to comprehend. For the next 6 to 8 hours of daylight, your ancestors did absolutely nothing that a modern economist would consider productive. But they did everything that actually matters to the human psyche. They sat in the shade of a large tree and talked. They played with the children. They napped. Anthropologists call this social time, and records show that hunter-gatherers spent upwards of 6 hours a day just interacting with one another. They would spend hours grooming each other, picking through hair, reinforcing social bonds. In a world without police forces, written laws, money, or legal contracts, your survival depended entirely on your relationships. If the tribe didn't like you or trust you, they didn't have to share your food with you when you were sick or injured. Therefore, sitting around, gossiping, telling jokes, and building deep emotional bonds wasn't a waste of time. It was the absolute highest priority. And because they had an abundance of this uninterrupted free time, ancient humans began doing something truly incredible. They started creating. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered tiny, delicate seashells with perfectly drilled holes dating back 100,000 years. What makes this mind-blowing is that the nearest coastline was over 20 kilometers away. That means someone walked 40 kilometers round trip just to find beautiful shells, and then spent hours meticulously drilling holes into them with stone tools just to string them together as jewelry. In a cave in Germany, researchers found a 40,000-year-old flute carved from the wingbone of a vulture. The finger holes were spaced with mathematical precision to create distinct musical pitches. And deep inside the caves of France and Spain, there are paintings of horses, rhinos, and lions, rendered with advanced perspective, shading, and a sense of movement. Ancient humans didn't do this to sell it. They didn't do it because it helped them hunt better. They did it for beauty, for meaning, and simply because they had the time. In our modern world, we are forced to squeeze our hobbies, our art, and our passions into the few exhausted hours left over at the end of a grueling workday. For ancient humans, art wasn't a luxury side hustle. It was what they did because they were free. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the entire camp would gather close around the central fire. This is the exact setting where human culture, as we know it, was actually born. An anthropologist named Polly Wessner spent years recording the exact conversations of hunter-gatherers both during the day and at night. She found a fascinating psychological shift. During the day, 80% of conversations were purely practical, complaints about chores, who saw animal tracks, or where the best plants were growing. But at night, around the fire, the entire dynamic flipped. 81% of the conversations shifted into storytelling. They told myths about how the world began. They told tales of ancestors who did impossible things. They sang songs, performed rituals, and told jokes that made the entire tribe roar with laughter. Under a vast, unpolluted night sky, with a full stomach and surrounded by every single person you loved and trusted, you felt completely safe. And when it was finally time to sleep, they didn't sleep the way we do now. Before the invention of artificial light, humans practiced what is called biphasic sleep. They would sleep for about 4 hours, wake up naturally around midnight for an hour or two in the darkness to talk, stoke the fire, or quietly reflect, and then fall back into a second sleep for another 4 hours until dawn. They never lay awake staring at the ceiling or stressing about an alarm clock or treating middle-of-the-night wakefulness as insomnia. It was just a natural part of existing. So, how did we get from that world of absolute freedom, leisure, and community to sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on a Monday morning on our way to perform data entry for a corporation? About 10,000 years ago, humanity fell into a trap, the trap of agriculture. We discovered how to domesticate plants and animals. At first, it seemed like a brilliant shortcut. Instead of searching for food, we could grow it right next to us. But agriculture required an immense amount of grueling, repetitive labor. You had to plow, plant, weed, irrigate, harvest, and defend your fields from raiders from dawn until dusk. But because agriculture produced a massive surplus of calories, the human population exploded. Within a few generations, there were too many mouths to feed. A tribe could no longer just pack up and go back to hunting and gathering. There simply wasn't enough wild game left to sustain the population. We were permanently locked in. With massive populations came the need for structure. Cities were built. Cities required administrators, managers, and rulers. Rulers required taxes, and taxes eventually transformed into employment, the revolutionary alien concept that your time no longer belonged to you. It belonged to whoever was paying you. By the time we built modern civilization, the original human lifestyle was completely erased, replaced by schedules, clocks, and obligations. You traded absolute freedom for food security. You traded leisure time for smartphones, skyscrapers, and economic growth. Biologically, you are the exact same animal as those ancient humans who walked the earth 50,000 years ago. Your brain and your body are wired for the rhythm of the campfire, the part-time schedule, and the deep communal connection. Yet we live in a world that is completely alien to our biology. Think about the irony of modern life. We spend our entire youth and adulthood grinding at a job, chasing promotions, accumulating wealth, and stressing over investments, all for one ultimate goal. So that one day, when we are old and tired, we can finally retire. So we can sit in the shade, spend time with our families, work on our hobbies, and do whatever we want with our day. But the ancient humans, they woke up every single morning already free. They were already enough. They didn't need to spend their lives building a successful career because they were already living the exact life that we spend our entire existence trying to earn back.